is a modern, easy, and interactive way for you to pay your charity. Your sadaqah can be transferred instantly and directly start helping orphans. Furthermore, you can donate to different projects such as clothing orphans, supplying clean water, heating fuel for the winter, and feeding the hungry. When you pay your sadaqah, it will be used to feed, clothe, and school orphans. Our app is accessible via the App Store and Google Play Store. Download today and pay your sadaqah on My Sadaqah.
We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. Now, this is a live show. We do take in all of your questions. If you have any question on any topic whatsoever, please send them in on the WhatsApp. The email address ahkamsos@imamhussein.tv, or alternatively give us a call on the studio 0203 515 0199. Inshallah, myself and the Sheikh will be able to discuss and answer any of your questions. I'm your host tonight, Mohsin Shah, and joining me is Sheikh Ali Ma'a. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
How are you this evening?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Sheikhna, let us begin with, can we give charity to those relatives who are not Muslim?
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. There's no objection to give the sadaqah to the non-Muslims with this regard, relatives for example, even non-relatives, let's say neighbors who are not Muslims but they are poor. In general, in some narrations, it's reported that the one can actually give. But in overall, one can give to all humanity who is in need, be it in the eastern of the world or western of the world. Whoever is in need, you can offer them help and support.
Ahsan. Sheikh, a couple of questions coming in from the WhatsApp. And we have one here. Sheikhna, we are unaware of the ingredients of food sold in shops in the Western countries. It might be free from those ingredients that are forbidden to us, or it might contain them. Are we allowed to eat such items? Are we without looking into the ingredients or inquiring about them, or is it not allowed to us?
Basically, you have to read the ingredients, especially from the non-Muslim countries, in which they sometimes add haram ingredients such as wine and pork or haram fat and so forth. So the one should read to make sure that they eat halal food and not haram food, because that has side effects in terms spiritually on the one's nafs when they eat it. So the best way is to read, especially if there is, for example, it says suitable for vegetarian, then you can be assured that there's no meat or fat and so forth contained in this product. But sometimes they add wine, so you have to be careful.
Sheikh, the question has, Salam sir, can you ask the Sheikh on the ahkam on anal sex, please?
The one should stay away from such act and not to basically get involved in such behavior على كل حال, due to the karaha, discouragement.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like sometimes it's kind of considered a little disrespectful, even though it's not really considered haram. It's makruh, but highly makruh, that not to be made a habit of. Furthermore, medically speaking, it does actually loosen the elasticity, which can cause flatulence, and also, you know, we know you won't have control over your bowels properly if we're into a habit. And if you lose that control over your body, it can be very, very harming, I guess, in the future. So it is something that needs to be taken into consideration very, very seriously. Sheikhna, according to His Eminence, the Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Bashir al-Najafi, when we bring in cars from the West, sometimes there's moisture in the cars, on the windows, on the seats and so forth. Can we deem this to be tahir, or do we treat it as it is najis?
The Sheikh mentions that if you're certain that the non-believing individual touched these parts of the vehicle, for example, imported from the non-Muslim country, and they have touched them with the wet hands, for example, then of course it becomes impure. So if you want to do wudu, for example, or eat, you have to purify your hands with water and then perform.
Sheikh, a question from the YouTube. Salam, can I take an istikhara for mut'a marriage?
Alaikum salam. Basically, istikhara is there for indecision and hesitation for anything. If you are unsure about your 50-50, then you ask Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah's advice through the Quran, for example.
Sheikh, assalamu alaikum. Another question from the YouTube. What's the limit to how long the mustache? I have seen a hadith telling us to trim the mustache. It is permissible for it to be longer than the beard. This is from the YouTube.
Yeah, it's better to be trimmed and shortened. That's what.
Is there a ruling in regards to not coming over the lip?
Yeah, there's something that try to avoid when you, especially when you drink water and so forth.
Your food to get involved.
Try avoid making it so long. So
I see.
they recommend it to be short.
Sheikh, according to His Eminence the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani, what is the ruling on buying and playing lottery tickets and other such games of chance?
The Sayyid says that it is not permissible. However, some ulama would mention that if the lottery tickets part of that gain and income from the lottery is paid to charitable organizations and building hospitals and orphanage and housing the homeless, for example, then you can, with this intention of paying to buy actually a ticket, with the intention of paying to the charity, then of course you can participate. Otherwise, as a play of chance or gambling, it's not permissible.
Sheikh, is it permissible to play with fireworks that are used on occasions of celebrations and such like?
There is no objection if there's no forbidden acts involved in that firework party, let's say. And also, it wouldn't harm the neighbors and wouldn't cause nuisance to the neighbors. So in this case, one can actually. But of course, it's better to go inside the big parks, try to go there and organize that fireworks party inside the big parks, inside the fields. Try to stay away from the residential areas, so you won't be harming people, especially if they're elderly. It's a care home, for example, children who might be scared, for example. So best thing is to avoid areas in which people live there.
I see. Sheikh, if one has missed one of his or more salah in previous days, should he pray the missed ones first?
No, it's not mandatory for the one to start with the missed one first and then the wajib, that one. So maybe they have the choice to start with the qada one first or with the ada one. But let's say if you have 6 months of salah, you can't finish them within 6 hours.
Okay. I mean, sometimes, Sheikh, there's always I feel that our brothers, they are very, very eager to do amal on special nights, Laylatul Qadr and so forth. But they have a backlog maybe of a couple of qada prayers. I mean, would you recommend that they perform the qada prayer or they perform the amal on that night?
If they are certain that they have qada, then of course let them do the qada first and then do the amal. And they can actually break down the salah in those 3 nights, or even the whole 10 nights of the last 1/3 of the month of Ramadan,
yes.
to be all to pray the qada.
Inshallah.
That's fine, there's no issue with it. And then do the amal, of course. You shouldn't miss the amal of these great nights.
Sheikh, a question from the YouTube. Is it wajib to trim the armpit and pubic hair, or is it only mustahab? And if yes, how often is it wajib to be done? Also, is there any other areas which must be trimmed or shaved? This is from the YouTube channel. From my findings in the Hawza, I believe a lot of it is mustahab. the armpit hair, the pubic hair, to grow the beard, trimming of the mustache is also mustahab. I don't think there's anything to say it is haram and forbidden to cut a certain part of your grooming wise to groom your body in any shape or form, no?
Yes, as you've mentioned, that it's been encouraged from the Sharia point that they want to shave all these parts, the ones you mentioned, and to trim the mustache. But sadly, we see today that, well, not mainly in the Muslim world, but in non-Muslim worlds, in which you see they would keep these hairs long enough, and they would clean shave their beard, opposite what the Islam says.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
It's not ideal. Another question from YouTube, Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
As-salam.
Should a Muslim take the corona vaccine? I am scared to take them, but the government tries to force it upon the citizens. It should be free choice. This is tyranny.
I mean, I have friends in which they consulted experts in this field. They spoke to a few people in the medical field, doctors, professors, and of course they have given the green light that this is basically useful to protect you from the expected virus. So we have to go back to the experts in this field and ask them.
I think a lot of people, I mean, they have misconceptions, or they don't trust our system. However, we do have medical experts who are there and employed, who do their jobs. And another thing is, I tell the viewers that when you ask questions in regards to medicine, the Maraj and the Maraj's office will go to a doctor and seek professional advice from a doctor. So the answers are all coming from the medical experts, the doctors and so forth. So it doesn't really matter what you ask the Marja, you might as well go back to your doctor and ask directly from your doctor. Sheikhna, another question from the YouTube. When is it good or necessary to perform an istikhara?
Istikhara, you have to go back to see there's a list of days and the times given. For example, on a Friday, it's good to do it between the dawn and the sunrise, for example.
Yes.
And then in the afternoon and so forth. You have to go back. There's a list for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so forth.
Okay.
To see which time is the best time for the istikhara.
Wow.
These are the best time, between the noon and afternoon, for example, between the morning and the noon.
Yes.
So it depends on the days, which days you're looking for.
Ahsan. Salam, Sheikhna. Is it permissible for men to trim or shave body hair, example chest, abdomen, legs or arms? From my knowledge, Sheikhna, there's nothing to stop you from grooming any part of your body. Yes, sir.
Yes, the haram and the exception is the beard that must be kept. And you're not allowed to shave it, basically.
About everything else, chest, arms, legs, for those who are bodybuilding and doing competitions, no issues in that whatsoever. Sheikhna, if the fetus dies in the womb of its mother and it stays in the womb constitutes danger for the mother, what would the ruling in this situation be?
Well, it becomes mandatory and wajib to remove it for the safety of the mother in the simplest way. So, because the fetus now is dead. Of course, the abortion is haram, is forbidden, but now you have no more fetus, living fetus or child inside the womb. It's a dead fetus, and it's causing difficulty for the life of the woman, for the mother. And then, of course, they have to remove it in this case.
Sheikh, a question from the YouTube. It's actually quite a good question. Is it mustahab for the male to cover his hair? And if so, does he have to do it with a turban, or can he do it with a scarf or a hat or a cap or so forth? We see, Sheikh, now so many times, the small caps that they wear in the mosques and so forth, especially when reciting Quran at madrasa. We were always told to cover your hair, to wear a cap on your head. You yourself, you'd know that when you pray salah, it is mustahab to wear an imama, whether you're a scholar or not, but as part of the attire and uniform of salah, to put on an imama and so forth. So covering the hair for men, is this some mustahabat with this?
Yes, it's mustahab for the man to wear amama on his head. And there's a famous hadith which says, al-amaim tijan al-arab. The amama is the crown for the Arab, for the men in overall. So it's important, if one wants to gain more thawab and rewards, at least to wear them in salah, if they can. If they don't wear, let's say, amama, and so forth, they can wear that in salah. And we had in the old days that, for example, the elderly used to wrap something, a scarf or something, around their head before the salah, just to gain that thawab for the salah with the amman, with the turban.
Yes. Also, Sheikh, I've read somewhere about when you're eating and also when you're going to the toilet to have your head covered. Is this
covering the head in the bathroom is to avoid the smell and so forth reaching the head and the nose. If you can also cover your nose and mouth as well, to avoid this steam of the from the toilet reaching the head.
To get involved with you. Sheikhna, a question from YouTube. If a husband has a permanent wife, is he allowed to have a temporary wife even if he cannot provide for both of them, and if the permanent does not want it? So we have an individual here, he's married, he has a wife, and they've got a full marriage in place. Is he allowed to then have a second wife with a temporary contract, a mut'a marriage with a second wife, though he cannot provide for her? And I think it's well established that you don't need the wife's permission for a second, third, fourth marriage anyway. So yes, if he cannot provide for her, is he still allowed to go ahead with this marriage?
You see, basically, the one should be just with his wife, the main wife, the first wife, and not to neglect her rights and the obligations upon his shoulder to offer all the requirements for his family. And it shouldn't be some kind of, that I'm trying to taste. Sometimes people try to change, and taste. This is not, something in which really encouraged. It could destroy and ruin your family life. So, ala kulli hal, you have to make sure that it doesn't destroy your main life, your family life, and it doesn't cause trouble. Ala kulli hal, this halal Allah Azza wa Jal, in terms of the long-term or short-term marriage. They're both allowed as a second marriage, but as I've said, it shouldn't be at the price of oppressing or neglecting the rights of the first or the main wife. That's important.
I see. Sheikh, now we're going to go to a small Shia Plus video, inshallah, where we'll see one of our young youth involved in a situation, and inshallah we can give him some Islamic advice on this, inshallah. So let's watch the video.
Yo, Ali. No, I don't have Wi-Fi. Okay, let's go. Wi-Fi on. Oh, someone's Wi-Fi. Can I use it without permission?
There you have Sheikh. Now, using Wi-Fi without asking permission. Now, there are certain places, like when you go towards a shopping center or airport and so forth, where you are allowed free Wi-Fi and so forth. But if I'm connecting, let's say I'm in an office block or something like that, and I'm connected to someone's Wi-Fi without asking their permission, Islamically, is this acceptable or not?
These are parts of the rights of the people. So, in terms of the Wi-Fi, each office, each company, each household, they have their own Wi-Fi with a password. You're not allowed to breach that privacy in terms of getting their Wi-Fi access, unless they allow you and permit you. So no, you can't unless you get permission and consent.
Ahsant. Sheikh, a question from the YouTube. How should Shia view Bilal, the first mu'adhin? So I'm assuming this is Hazrat Bilal al-Habshi, who was very well known as the first ever mu'adhin to recite the adhan on top of the Kaaba. Including, we have riwayat which we've discussed before, where it was said Ashhadu anna Aliyan waliyullah was also said in that adhan and so forth. As Shia, what is our, you could say, opinion, our stance, our view on Hazrat Bilal al-Habshi?
Yes, he is indeed one of the good companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and who followed the right path, of course.
Ahsant. Sheikhna, according to His Eminence, the Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Bashir al-Najfi, is it possible to purify refined oils produced from plants if they are impure in Islamic jurisprudence? Note that some of these oils are fluids and some are frozen.
The Sheikh mentions that oil cannot be purified after it becomes najis and impure. But what one can do is to recycle this oil. There are companies who take these oils and turn it into fuel, for example, and so forth.
Sheikh, if while reciting a surah one forgets some parts of the surah while reciting it, or is compelled not to complete it due to insufficient time or some other reason, what should he do?
The one can, for example, abandon the surah, especially if it's a long surah, and recite another shorter surah in this case.
Sheikh, a question from the YouTube. I have autism, therefore I need a social worker, but he is not a Muslim and a male. Is this allowed, or should I send him away? I see him in the office, not at home. I'm assuming this is a sister speaking, and that she has autism and therefore she requires a social worker. He's not a Muslim, he's a male, and on top of that, he's not a Muslim neither. So what could one do in this situation? Hold on, there's more to the question. He helps me with financial problems and things like that, not anything personal. My husband does not like it, but I need this help for my autism.
Initially, if they can replace him, if they can ask the, let's say the hospital, whoever else involved, to have a male, a female, if she's a female, to have a female carer instead.
Yes.
That's the first
step
with regards to the shari'i hukum. Because at the end of the day, he's a male and she's a female, and there are interactions, communications, it could be haram, halal things. You know, you never know what's going to happen. And because they are not Muslims, they may not know the rules in terms of touching, for example. It happens out of a sudden. So initially they have to find out if they can replace it with a female carer. If not, she's compelled, there's a difficulty, then of course she has to preserve and observe her hijab when he's there, and to tell him that, you know, you can't touch, you can't do such and such, for example, ask permission, knock the door, whatever, to respect the hijab criteria with this regard.
I see. Excellent. Sheikh, more questions coming in. Is it permissible for a man to wear silk? I believe that it is strictly forbidden.
Yes.
Unless it's something like 20% silk or something. If it's not pure silk, if it's mixed with another you could say, material. But the silk ties and the silk pockets and stuff, that's okay, no?
Yeah, the main thing that the pure silk is haram for the men. That's very important to know. I mean, women can wear it, but not men.
Ahsan. Another question from the YouTube. Assalamu alaikum. In Japanese culture, they bow when they greet as a sign of respect. Can we bow back, especially in a martial arts class, I guess? So, Japanese culture, greeting is very well known and famous that they bow their heads. As a response, are we allowed to bow back?
I mean, that's not ruku' or some kind of worship someone else, a human being, for example. It's just a sign of respect. This is their culture. Shouldn't be an issue. Okay.
So another one from the YouTube. I'm reciting Zat Ashura for 40 days for the fulfillment of major problems in my life. I've read it must be started on a Wednesday. Is this accurate? And if so, what is the reason for it? If I'm unable to recite the la'an and salawat 100 times in one sitting, can you please provide an alternative?
With regard to the first question about Wednesday, I'm not sure if such narration or statement has been mentioned somewhere. But for the second part of the question, you can say after the la'an, Allahumma la'anhum jami'an 100 marra, 100 times. Yeah. And the salam as well, you say after the end of the salam, وعلى أصحاب الحسين 100 مرة, the salam. So you say 100 times. That should fulfill the requirement of the ziyarah of the, instead of saying 100 times, the salam and the la'an.
Sheikh, is it permissible to use sex toys in its various types for sexual pleasures? Now, I remember Sayyid Ammar had a whole show on this, and he discussed, and he said it's strictly forbidden to use any instruments and any foreign objects, into the body and so forth.
The only pleasure tools allowed is the is the body and the hands of the opposite, the husband and the wife.
Spouse.
Exactly.
Which
Nothing
are
else. Nothing else.
Excellent. Sheikh, I want to go to a short break. Join us after the break as we continue answering your questions and discussions here on Ahkam SOS. If you're watching via the YouTube or you're watching on television, send in your questions, WhatsApp, email address, give us a call 0203 515 0199. Those of you on YouTube or on Facebook Live, leave your questions in the comment section. Inshallah, the technical team will send them towards me and we'll be able to discuss and answer your questions. See you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
I have a question regarding keeping pictures of
Is it
scholars at
permissible to
home.
plant trees by or
Was
over
Islam
the graves?
established based on peace and
Is it permissible
non-violence?
to collect donations for charity projects from
Is it permitted to consume canned food imported from non-Muslim
Is there
countries?
an issue for men looking at non-Muslim women?
To have your questions answered live, call in on +44 2035 150199 or WhatsApp us on +44 7415 092155. Alternatively, you can also email us on ahkamsos@imamhussein.tv.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. This is a live show. We do take in your questions. MashaAllah, in the first half, we've had so many questions from the YouTube, from WhatsApp. Keep sending in your questions. Send it via the WhatsApp number. Send it via email, ahkamsos@imamhussein.tv. If you want to call into the studio, 0203 515 0199. If you're watching via YouTube, via Facebook Live, any form of social media, put your question in the comment section. The technical team will be able to give me the questions, and inshallah, myself and the Sheikh will be able to discuss and answer all of your questions. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sheikh, we've got a question here. I'm assuming it's from the WhatsApp or the YouTube. Will we be punished if we miss our salah completely and can only talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every moment of the suffering or the fitna or the fear? Or does the Lord's mercy extend to such a degree that He still covers them under His wing?
Allah Azza wa Jal is the one who created this creation and the human beings, and He sent the prophets and the sharia and the books and so forth. So, and He asked us to worship Him. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinn and the ins except to worship me. He instructs how to worship Him, not us.
Yes.
So we have to follow Allah's guidelines. Like today's governments, they instruct their citizens how to follow the rules of that country, the rules of the land. And you can't really disobey them. Otherwise you end up in the court. So Allah Azza wa Jal is the wise, is the creator. When He told us to pray 5 times a day, then we have to do so. And you can't just abandon it just because of, I can pray in my heart, I give charity and so forth. We have to follow Allah's guidelines so we gain the happiness in this world and in the hereafter. Because that 5 times daily prayer is for us to purify us from the sins and the wrongdoings and to prepare us to reach the stages of perfection gradually.
Sheikh, a question from the YouTube. How do we deal with Sunni Muslims who attack Shia Islam? Why do they attack us?
Basically, the one who is on the right path, the one who is following the instructions of Allah Azza wa Jal and the guidelines of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he said, I leave 2 necessary things, the Book of Allah, Quran, and my progeny, Atrati Ahl Bayti. We followed this instruction from the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we followed Al-Ghadir, in which the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in front of over 100,000 Sahaba, appointed Ali Alayhi Salam as a Khalifa and leader. But the others ignored and rejected. And they want us to also reject and ignore and denounce, in which we didn't. And that's why we pay the price. We are paying the hefty price for the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'minin Salamullah alayhi.
I see, Ahsant. Sheikhna, are we allowed to eat lobsters as Shia Muslims? This is from YouTube as well. Lobsters, very, very popular with certain Muslims, but according to the Jafri fiqh, not a fish with scales.
Not permissible at all, no.
Excellent. How can we call Christians to Islam? That's on YouTube as well.
The Holy Quran states, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. So use the best methods and tools and means to attract them to Islam. With your behavior, with your good deeds, with your generosity and charitable work, for example. All the means in which can attract the others towards Islam, which we have to use it. And we have to also give them the true and real Islam. Islam of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad sallallahu alayhi. Not the Islam of the Amawids or Abbasids or the Uthmanis.
Excellent. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna. How do we know the paintings of Imam Ali alayhi salam actually how he looked like? Is it even allowed to paint Prophet and his family? That's on YouTube.
In overall, there isn't that much encouragement to do these paintings. It doesn't represent the real image of the Imam alayhi salam. No, we never saw him. Nobody saw him. So how come we can accept? I mean, there's no issue if somebody wants to have them in his room, in his house, in his center, for example. But in overall, it's not something that represents, the real image of the Prophet or Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam.
I guess what we were told was that it is not the exact way that they looked, but in a way it's someone's interpretation, and also it's a way that when you look at this portrait, you remember Imam Ali. When you look at this portrait, you remember Abu Fadl al-Abbas or Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Not that they looked exactly like that, but it's like an icon or a symbol or emblem to represent who they were and their spirit. Assalamu alaikum. I've heard that according to most Maraja, doing la'an in front of Sunnis, but if we are in a situation that if we don't do la'an, it can cause Muslims to be misguided, is it permissible? So doing la'an in front of Sunnis, I guess, but la'an, is there a time and place for la'an, Sheikhna? Because la'an and tabarra is part of our faith and religion.
Yes, indeed, it is part of our faith, unless there is an issue with of shedding the blood. You're in a situation of being, let's say, taken to...
Your life is on the threat.
Yes, exactly. In this case, of course, takiyah is there. Takiyah is permissible for the one who wants to perform it and avoid, showing la'an and so forth. حتى تتقوا, there's ayah in Quran, I can't remember exactly, with regard to the takiyah about Ammar ibn Yasir when he was captured and taken by the mushrikeen and tortured. So he said the words that pleases the mushrikeen and idol worshippers, but his heart was strong. So with faith. So taqiyya is in the Quran. This great Sahabi, radhiyallahu alayhi, performed this act of taqiyya in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet affirmed it, that his heart, is filled with iman, with taqwa. But on his tongue, he had to say these words so he would save his life, because they killed his parents.
Yes. Sheikh, what kind of hijab did Fatima Zahra sallallahu alayha wear? That's from YouTube as well. I heard 7 layers, and the story goes that women were meant to do hijab from other men, but Fatima Zahra sallallahu alayha, she did hijab from the sun.
Yes, as you mentioned, it was a proper hijab from her head towards her toes, so fully covered. And when she went out for the sermon, for the khutbah, she had the women around her.
Yeah.
So that's another hijab, in other words.
Yes.
And when she went to the mosque to offer the sermon, to give the sermon, the curtains were drawn, and she gave the sermon behind the curtains. So you can see how, Salamun Allah, she represented the true hijab and the example of the best and the utmost hijab of a woman. Of course, ulama today would say that a woman can show her hands and her face. That's it, nothing else, without makeup, without any beautification. So, I mean, if the one can do so, that is allowed. Yes, it's good for the lady who can cover her face when she goes out. It is a good thing.
Good practice. Sheikh, now is it permissible to buy and sell Bitcoin in Islam?
I mean, this question is a bit awkward because there are different opinions of the ulama. One says it's forbidden. One says that you have to go back and ask others. I don't get involved, so he's not going to answer. Some other marja' says it is allowed. It is a trade. There's no issue. So it's difficult to answer this question. Yeah.
Ahsan. Shaykh Salam, what is the ruling on fasting and hajj of the deceased?
Sorry, fasting?
And hajj of the marhum that have passed away.
Yes, why not?
Is it allowed, acceptable?
Both get the reward and the thawab, definitely.
That was from YouTube. Another question from YouTube. I have a question. What is considered israf and how can we avoid it?
You have israf and you have tabdhir. Now, tabdhir is a total waste of something. So let's say you have a 10-pound notes or dollars and you just burn it, for example. That's tabdhir. Or you buy a box of, I don't know, chocolate or fruits or whatever, and you throw them in the bin straight away. That's tabdhir. Israf is to throw away part or some of the uneaten or let's say food. So you just buy an apple and you throw it. That's israf. Or you drink the water and you
spill the rest.
Spill the rest, the half of, for example. So that's the difference between tabdhir and israf.
I see. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykhna. What can a 28-year-old female do in a situation that her parents do not accept the man she would like to marry? The couple is from the same culture and both Shia Muslims. The parents' reason is that the man does not hold a degree, but the female holds many educational degrees. And that's from the WhatsApp. So we have a female very well educated. She would like to marry a suitable man based on aqidah, based on akhlaq, I'm assuming. But the parents are getting involved in saying that no, he's not educated enough for you to marry him. In this situation, is there anything she can do? Or is it that her guardian, her father and her grandfather, their opinion and their decision overrules how she thinks and how she feels?
I mean, in overall of such disputes, family or marital disputes, they have to go back to local mosque or the center or to see a Maulana or an expert who they can sit down and give details, both parties, both sides give details about the situation and why the parents are rejecting and why she is insisting, in which the one can basically solve their problem. And we can't really see what's going on exactly, so we have to hear from both sides.
Sure, Sheikh, a question from the WhatsApp, a bit vague, but we'll use some of our own integrity to try and answer this. What is the ruling when you adopt a child girl, especially, and a boy? I'm assuming it's to do with hijab and mahram and la mahram. I am assuming.
Of course, they do not belong to you as your own children, and if the boy grows up and he becomes baligh, the wife should wear hijab from him, and likewise, if the girl she grows up, the husband should avoid looking at her without hijab. So they just adopt it. And even Ayatollah Sistani mentions in his fatwa that you cannot register their names as your own sons and daughters on the legal paper, citizenship and so forth. We're not allowed.
Sheikh, from YouTube, if doctor determines that a fetus has severe birth defects that would reduce their quality of life or eliminate it altogether when carried to term, is it possible to abort the fetus? Okay, so a lady is pregnant, she has a baby, but the baby is going to be very, very disabled, deformed, defected, and so forth, will struggle through its life. Is that a valid excuse to abort the fetus?
In overall, abortion is not allowed in Islam unless the mother is in a life-threatening situation. Yes. And I think that I've read something about that if the child is severely in terms of the birth-wise would be distorted and so forth. But in overall, there are exceptions to abort, otherwise it's not allowed. Abortion is not allowed.
Shaykhna, assalamu alaikum. What are the
Assalam.
proof of praying with hands down and not folding the hands? And that's from the YouTube. Shaykhna, according to history, even the early Muslims, even the Sunni Muslims, prayed with their hands by their sides. This was later introduced from the second Caliph after viewing Iranian prisoners of war and captives, how they would address him by folding their arms and so forth, and it was introduced that way. So, I mean, a big proof is that from the Sunni school of thought, the Malikis, who was a tabi'in, I believe, he encourages people to pray with their hands by their sides, and said this is how it was done with the tabi'in, and this is how it was done with the Sahaba as well. So history already shows us that the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even from the Sunni school of thought, was by praying with your hands by your sides. No?
Well, the question should be asked for those who pray folded hand, that where did they get this from? So it's the opposite. We have to ask them, bring the proof that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray in this way. So we have to ask them first before we answer.
I see. Sheikh, can we do multiple niyyah when doing 2 rak'ah for parents, and can that be accepted as nafilah? Also, hadiyah mayyat can be accepted as nafilah. This is from the YouTube channel. So I guess performing a 2 rak'ah salah, but with the niyyah of thawab, going to my parents, my grandparents, my marhum,
Ziyarah
my community and so forth. Is this acceptable?
Should
Is this
be fine,
allowed?
yes, inshallah. There's no issue with it.
From the YouTube again, Shaykhna, why is music haram?
We have Quranic verses with this regard, that something that deters you from the dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is a vain and nonsense. If it's a song, then if it doesn't have any kind of objective or aim in this regard. It's just to entertain one. I recall 2 verses with this regard. Laghu, there's the word of laghu mentioned, if I'm not wrong. على كل حال. قول الزور, that's another one. So these are mentioned in the hadith that they are the ghina, or the songs, which is the music. Islam tries to elevate the one's intellect and soul to the right and through the right means, and not just to entertain and enjoy without any means. So even if I play, what is the objective of the music, for example? We can see today in nightclubs, the music is played, is just to dance. And at the end of the day, is a key towards the act of vice. Na'udhu billah. Music brings alcohol, brings drugs, brings haram women, and so forth.
I see. So the whole nature of it is just not ideal. Shaykhna, if you use substances that form a waterproof barrier over your skin, example, Vaseline, oil, gets treatment, or gels for treatment, example, for dry skin, and it's not easy to remove the substance, is also done with this valid? This is from YouTube. So someone's got, it happens a lot of body butter, these are for cosmetic, but sometimes they said they're gel for treatments and so forth. You've got a barrier over the skin, maybe the water cannot penetrate through to touch the skin. Is ghusl still valid in this situation? Wudu, can we still do wudu in these situations?
If that is required and essential for the treatment, for example, as you mentioned, like we have the splint, you have the wounds where you have plaster on it, these are essentials. You have to basically avoid blood gushing out, for example, from the wound and so forth. And it's allowed, and the one can do the wudu or the ghusl as with jabira, ghusl or wudu jabira. But for cosmetics, no, you have to remove it. It's not an essential and requirement. So you have to remove it and then do the wudu and ghusl.
If it is like a barrier between the skin and the water.
If barrier, yes.
And the water cannot actually touch the skin at all. Ahsan. Shaykhna, will good Sunnis, this is from YouTube, will good Sunnis who are good human pray, fast and give to charity, go to heaven?
What we have in overall, that on the Day of Judgment, Allah Azza wa Jal would test those who were unaware of the haqq, of the truth. And it seems to be that the majority of Christians, of Ahl Sunnah, of all other religions, Hindus and so forth. who are the majority, are unaware of the haqq and the truth. So Allah Azza wa Jal on the Day of Judgment will test them again in a specific way and method. If they pass this test, they will go to paradise definitely. Otherwise, of course, they will go to the hell. Na'udhu billah.
Sheikh, final question from for this evening from YouTube. Why is alcohol haram?
Alcohol, according to the Quran, it has more disadvantage and harmfulness than the advantage. So, as we see today, there are car crashes due to alcohol. The one loses his mind, his aql, becomes drunk. And the side effects and the diseases caused by drinking, especially. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is wise. When He says haram, He knows why. Mm-hmm. He created us and He knows. Even eating pork meat, for example. Why is it haram? Mm-hmm. There are things in which we know or we don't know. We submit. Islam means submission. Aslama yuslamu, submission. That's why we follow without asking and going into the details. Why is it that we have to pray 2 rak'ah subh in the Fajr namaz? Why can't we pray 4? I'm waking up now with full energy. Let me pray 4 salat subh. No, Allah says only 2. Why? We don't know. If you know, inshallah, tell us please. Otherwise, we have to follow Allah Azza wa Jal. Of course, we can ask, we can search. There are reasons, there are things. But in overall, Islam means submission to Allah's hukum. And you can, of course, read the narrations, the riwayat, hadith, to find out more about the reasons. There's a book called yes, by I think it's Sheikh al-Saduq, Hilal al-Shara'i', the reason of the Sharia rules. Interesting book. It gives that. Why is it that alcohol is haram, for example? It brings the hadith. Why is it that pork is haram? It brings the hadith. Why can't we eat, for example, rabbit? This is a hadith, and so forth. Interesting book. You may, if it's in English or in your language, you can read it and find the reason for these ahkam.
Sheikh, I think we've got time for one more question. Is having intercourse not with the intimate areas of a woman permissible? So I'm assuming, with the hands and so forth and other parts of the body, is this acceptable? Is this allowed in Islam?
As I've said, the pleasure is allowed with both side bodies, but they can't use any objects outside their own hands and bodies. So they can't use toys and so forth.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. And thank you to all the viewers for joining us on this episode of Ahkam SOS. If we haven't answered your question, we do apologize as we run out of time. Inshallah, we'll be able to answer them on the next episode, which will be on Monday, 6:30 here on Imam Hussein TV 3. If you have any questions you'd like to send in on any topic whatsoever, there's no topic too silly or too taboo. If you want an answer specifically from a marja, then please let us know. We do have access to the official offices and all the official representatives of all the maraja. Inshallah, we'll be able to get your answers. Send your questions via the WhatsApp, the email address. Give us a call 0203 515 0199. If you're watching via the YouTube or from Facebook, send in your questions on the comment section, and inshallah we'll be able to discuss and answer them on Monday here on Imam Hussein TV 3. See you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.
Are you in court for raping English girls? You're here defending the paedophile. I'm here defending your dad. These women are here defending the paedophile. You're here defending.
We don't need a TV channel because we've got mosques.
We have Islamic centres that are always open. We have schools teaching Islam.
Hijab is part of a school uniform.
Islam has come and it's established here in the West.
And everyone's happy.
They love us, our food, our fashion,
our culture.
The media is always on our side.
We've got plenty of English speakers, plenty of English books,
and plenty of places to go and learn in the English language.
Let's be real.
Let's get active. Be more involved.
www.imamhusseinfree.tv.
Imam Hussein Media Group is a virtual university that works on a global scale to spread the true message of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt's peace and blessings be upon them. Imam Hussein TV was established 10 years